the scent of stale oil, industrial disinfectant, and the metallic tang of pennies always clung to me. It was the permanent perfume of poverty and relentless effort. I wasn't dirty, I was exhausted. The last 3 decades of my life had been spent squeezing every single cent, every ounce of my youth, into a singular mission: to give my only daughter, Clara, a life that wasn't defined by the meager, unfortunate name Halloway. "It sounds like a street name," she'd scoffed once, her voice dripping with the practiced disdain of a teenager who only saw her own reflection. She was 15 then, stepping out of my beat-up, worn-out Honda Civic, the one I'd kept running for 20 years with duct tape, cheap oil changes, and sheer desperation. "Mom, why did you have to keep it? Why didn't you marry someone with, a real name? Something with history. Something like Montgomery." I just manage a tight, weary smile, a practiced anesthetic thing that never quite reached my eyes. "It is a real name, sweetie. It's our name." If only she knew the terrible secret history behind that plain, ugly name. But Clara didn't care about history. She cared only about status. She cared about Instagram followers, designer logos, and the kind of glittering, effortless wealth she saw in glossy magazines and on her friends' elaborate social media feeds. I was her foundation, but in her view, I was an anchor made of cheap, rusting iron, forever dragging down her potential. I was the inconvenient truth she desperately tried to conceal. I was only 22 years old when I dropped out of university. My dream of becoming a certified public accountant vaporized overnight, because I was pregnant. Her father, a charming but fundamentally toxic man named Mark, exited before Clara's first birthday, taking his non-Halloway name and, more importantly, all his financial responsibility with him. I never chased him. I never looked back. I didn't have the time or the energy. I had a daughter to save from the poverty that had haunted my side of the family for generations. I worked 3 jobs for years, stitching together enough income to afford the impossible. From 6 a.m. to 2 p.m., I was a cheerful, unflappable receptionist at a busy, low-income dental office, dealing with paperwork, insurance battles, and screaming children. From 3 p.m. to 7 p.m., I managed the messy, chaotic books for a small local bakery, often smelling like burnt sugar and yeast when I got home. From 8 p.m. until midnight, I cleaned sterile corporate offices downtown, scrubbing floors and emptying trash cans for people who earned my yearly salary in a single month. My house was silent except for the rhythmic, failing hum of the old refrigerator, the only thing that hadn't been sold off, pawned, or sacrificed for Clara's private school tuition or her ridiculous, expensive equestrian lessons. Every time she complained about her life, every time she whispered into her phone, "My mom's so lame and poor," I didn't get angry. I mentally tallied the 9,000 hours I'd spent kneeling on cold marble floors, answering phones, and denying myself basic necessities, so that she wouldn't have to experience the same crushing humiliation of need. I gave her the future I couldn't have. I gave her the right to despise me. The sacrifices weren't just financial. They were social and emotional. I hadn't had a proper conversation with a peer outside of work in 10 years. My friends dwindled to nothing because I could never afford a night out, and I certainly couldn't afford a babysitter. My body was perpetually broken and exhausted, but seeing Clara's face light up when she got into her exclusive university, or the way she walked with unearned confidence through life, made the sacrifice feel like a painful, necessary offering to the gods of class mobility. Clara's engagement to Ethan Montgomery, a man whose last name sounded like the thick, beautiful paper money she craved, was supposed to be my ultimate reward. I imagined a quiet, tearful moment of thanks. I planned a heartfelt toast about how proud I was that she had finally escaped the curse of the Halloway name. Instead, the 6 months of wedding planning were a brutal, unending masterclass in her toxic entitlement. "Mom, the budget for the floral arrangements is $80,000, Clara declared over the phone one afternoon, her voice demanding, flat, and absolute. I was staring at a stack of overdue bills, wondering how to pay the dentist. "You said you'd contribute. 80,000, Clara?" I whispered, feeling the breath leave my lungs. "I was planning on contributing maybe 7,000. That's all I have left in savings." Her voice turned sharp, cutting, and utterly without empathy. 7,000? That's an insult. This is the Montgomery wedding, Mom. People are judging us. My future mother-in-law, Penelope, asked me yesterday why your side wasn't pulling its weight. You need to fix this or I'll just tell people you're sick and stay home during the ceremony. I will not have my moment ruined by your cheapness. The sheer audacity of the threat to exclude me, her own mother, from her wedding because I couldn't bankroll her colossal vanity, didn't just wound me, it broke the final seal of my endurance. I scrambled as I always did. I drained my small retirement account, sold off my one valuable heirloom, a modest gold locket, and finally took out a dangerous second mortgage on the humble house I had struggled so hard to pay off. I wired her the necessary $50,000. Thank you, Mom, she said when the money arrived, her tone instantly dismissive, as if I just remembered to perform a mundane chore. Now please try not to wear anything too colorful. You need to blend in. No one needs to be reminded of the Halloway side of the family. You are a liability. That night, alone in my silent house, I didn't cry. The capacity for tears had been leached out of me years ago. I was just done. Done being the family's dirty secret. Done being the financial victim. Done being the punchline. I lay awake staring at the ceiling thinking, she hates me. She truly deeply hates me. It was 2 days later, less than a week before the wedding, when the plain cream-colored envelope arrived. It had the crest of a prestigious London law firm, a crest I vaguely recognized from a decades-old photograph. I opened it, expecting a sophisticated scam. Instead, I found a formal, impeccably detailed letter addressed to Mrs. Eleanor Halloway. It meticulously detailed the passing of Elias Halloway, my maternal great-uncle, a man I had never met, who had lived his entire adult life abroad after a bitter, catastrophic family feud decades ago. The feud had been so deep that our immediate family, the losing side, had been stripped of their wealth and forced to simplify their aristocratic name, leaving us with the plain, common Halloway that Clara despised. Elias, the forgotten man, had never married and had no children. The letter was cold, but the key paragraph hit me with the force of an oncoming train. Due to the exhaustive search for next of kin and the specific, ironclad nature of Mr. Elias Halloway's last will and testament, which stipulated that the entire estate be passed in its entirety to the closest living relative bearing the Halloway name, we have identified you as the sole and rightful beneficiary. A preliminary assessment places the total liquid cash value in excess of $10 million US. My hand started shaking so violently I dropped the letter. I knelt down, retrieved it, and reread the number. $10 million. It wasn't a typo. It wasn't a cruel joke. It was real. The letter requested I fly to New York the week after Clara's wedding to meet with the U.S. Consul and execute the transfer of funds. The name Clara hated, the name I had apologized for, the name that felt like a curse of perpetual mediocrity. It was a secret password to a fortune so vast it defied my lifetime of struggle. My first instinctual thought was Clara. I wanted to call her, scream the news, and watch the coldness melt from her eyes. She wouldn't have to worry about the Montgomerys looking down on her poor Halloway mother. They would finally be proud. But then I remembered her icy voice. I hate that name and I hate her. I remembered the forced second mortgage. I remembered the threat of being disinvited. I remembered the feeling of being disposable. A cold, surgical realization settled in my gut, heavier than any debt. This money was not a gift to share. It was a weapon of self-preservation. I tucked the letter into a safe deposit box, not even telling my best friend. The wedding was in 2 days. Let the world see me, Eleanor Halloway, one last time, as the poor, pitiable mother of the bride. Let Clara have her shining, cruel moment of public shaming. Because she didn't know the most important thing. She didn't know that the shameful Halloway name was about to make me untouchable, and her utterly dependent. The Montgomery wedding was not a joyful celebration. It was a calculated, extravagant performance designed to solidify a dynasty and rub the faces of the less fortunate into the gravel. It was held at the Glenwood Estate, the most exclusive private property in the state, a sprawling, pristine mansion nestled on acres of manicured land, every perfectly trimmed hedge and imported marble fountain whispering of ancient, untouchable wealth. The air was heavy with the scent of money, old leather, and a judgmental silence that seemed to follow me everywhere. I arrived in a rental car. The Honda was too embarrassing to bring. Dressed in a simple deep sapphire gown that was the most expensive thing I owned, yet felt flimsy and threadbare next to the shimmering silks and diamond cascades worn by the other guests. As I walked through the grand iron gates, I felt every eye on me, judging the humble, common mother who clearly didn't belong. Ethan's mother, Penelope Montgomery, a woman whose face was permanently set in a taut, brittle mask of polite disdain, intercepted me near the fountain. She was a master of the backhanded compliment, a velvet glove over a steel fist. "Eleanor, so glad you could make it," she cooed, her smile sharp and insincere. She glanced pointedly at my dress, then back at my face. "We saved you a seat in the back row near the kitchen entrance. It will be easier for you to slip out afterward. We want the official photos to focus primarily on the Montgomery side." Slip out. As if I were a catering staff member who had mistakenly wandered into the ceremony. I felt the familiar hot burn of humiliation, the kind of shame that had defined my life. But this time it was different. This time there was a shield. I looked at Penelope, whose diamond necklace likely cost more than my entire lifetime's earnings, and a cold thought surfaced. In 3 days I'll have enough money to buy this entire ridiculous estate and rename it Halloway Hall. The thought was intoxicating. It was my secret armor, and it allowed me to offer Penelope a small, tight smile. "That is remarkably thoughtful of you, Penelope," I replied, my voice calm. "But I think I'll take a seat closer to the front. I'm the mother of the bride, after all." I walked past her stunned, sputtering form and took my seat in the second row, ignoring the furious glances she shot my way. I needed to see Clara's face clearly. I needed to remember this moment, this pain, because it was the price of my future. The ceremony itself was a blur of expensive saccharine vows and the soaring strains of a hired string quartet. Clara, radiant in a dress that reportedly cost what I made in 5 grueling years of working 3 jobs, looked every inch the flawless, destined society bride. When her eyes finally met mine down the aisle, there was no warmth, only a brief, vaguely annoyed acknowledgement, as if she were mentally checking me off a list of mandatory decorum. She was beautiful, but her beauty was a polished veneer over a cruel, selfish core. The reception was held in a colossal glass-walled marquee pitched on the estate's lawn. The air was thick with the scent of lilies and French champagne. The toasts began after the main course. Ethan's father, a large, loud man, gave a lengthy self-congratulatory speech about the merger of 2 great fortunes, completely omitting the fact that one side was clearly devoid of fortune. His friends were equally tedious, praising Ethan's business acumen and Clara's good taste in alliances. I was scheduled to go last. I clutched my notes, a simple, sincere 20-second message about love, happiness, and letting go. I was planning to keep it short and unremarkable. Clara, however, had other ideas. As I made a move to stand, she grabbed the antique silver microphone from the podium, tapping the glass sharply until a hush fell over the 300 well-dressed, wealthy guests. "Thank you all for being here," Clara began, her voice sickeningly sweet and amplified to reach the farthest corners of the tent. "I just wanted to take a moment to address something personal." I tensed, a cold, hard knot forming deep in my stomach. I knew that tone. It was the tone she used right before she inflicted maximum emotional damage. Her eyes, magnified by the spotlight, locked onto mine, and the sugary sweetness vanished, replaced by a cold, cutting hostility that made my blood run cold. "Everyone here talks about our 2 families joining tonight," she continued, her voice echoing unnaturally. "But let's be honest. It's really just the Montgomery name taking me in, giving me the life I deserve. I mean, my mother. God bless her for trying, I guess. She did her best with the little she had. But I've had to carry this last name my whole life." She paused for a long, agonizing moment of dramatic effect. The 300 guests exchanged uncomfortable, whispering glances, their curiosity now fully piqued. The silence was thick with shared embarrassment. "Halloway," She practically spat the word into the microphone, distorting the simple name into something vile and repulsive. It sounds cheap. Sounds common. Sounds like nothing. It's a name associated with hand-me-downs and second-hand cars. It's the name of shame. I gripped the edge of my elegant chair until my knuckles were white, trying to force air past the choking sensation in my throat. She's doing this. She's actually using her wedding to publicly eviscerate me. Then she delivered the killing blow, the part that proved this was not just a comment about class, but a savage personal attack. I'm so incredibly grateful that Ethan and I agreed that I would take his name, and that the name Halloway will finally be buried and forgotten. Because frankly I've always hated it. And I'm ashamed to admit this, but... She leaned closer to the microphone, her perfect, well-made-up face set in a look of triumphant spite. Her eyes still locked onto mine, held a cold, venomous glint. I'm ashamed to be her daughter. I'm ashamed to be Eleanor Halloway's daughter. The words hung in the air, amplified and stretched into a horrifying eternity. The silence broke not with outrage, but with nervous, then genuine laughter. Ethan's friends, fueled by French champagne and encouraged by Clara's daring cruelty, started to laugh louder. Penelope Montgomery, seated beside me, let out a sharp, nasty, triumphant snicker that cut me deeper than the microphone's feedback. Clara beamed, a look of pure, satisfied vindication washing over her face. She had succeeded. She had publicly denounced the last meager tie to her former life. She had effectively erased me from her narrative. I felt a profound internal shattering. Every sleepless night, every second job, every single self-denial and sacrifice I had made for her. She had just reduced it all to shame in front of 300 privileged strangers. But then the lawyer's words echoed through the hollow space where my heart had been. The sole beneficiary of his entire estate, including a significant liquid cash value in excess of $10 million. The irony was not just bitter. It was a devastating self-inflicted wound. She was condemning the name just as it was about to bestow upon me wealth and power she couldn't dream of. I stood up slowly, deliberately, my movements stiff and unnatural, ignoring the concerned and mostly curious looks. The heartfelt toast I had rehearsed felt utterly ludicrous now. I folded the note card and slipped it into my clutch. The time for sentimentality was over. I looked at Clara, who was now being embraced by Ethan, both utterly oblivious to the massive emotional wreckage they had created. I didn't see my daughter anymore. I saw a betrayer, a greedy stranger who had taken everything I had, and then mocked me for having nothing left to give. I didn't say a word. I simply turned my back on the smiling, laughing crowd, the beautiful tent, and the cold, glittering promise of a life I could never be a part of. I walked calmly toward the kitchen entrance, just as Penelope had suggested, and kept walking until I reached the rental car. I didn't look back at the light and the laughter. I got in, started the engine, and drove home to my quiet, humble house. I didn't feel broken anymore. I felt an immense, terrifying calm. That night, lying alone in my bed, the acute pain of the betrayal was quickly eclipsed by a cold, surgical clarity. I thought of the $10 million. The inheritance was no longer a personal rescue. It was not a comfort. It was now my ultimate tool for justice. She had asked for the Halloway name to be buried in shame. I would bury her future in the cold, hard reality of the choice she had just made. The 4 days following the wedding betrayal were the strangest, most transformative days of my entire life. My humble house, the one I had sacrificed 30 years to secure, felt less like a home and more like a tomb. Clara hadn't called. I hadn't expected her to. She had achieved her goal, the complete, public, and seemingly consequence-free severing of the Halloway tie. For her, the drama was over. For me, the real story was just beginning. The Montgomerys predictably launched the first bureaucratic strike. An email arrived from their family's assistant, written in the stiff, passive-aggressive language of the entitled. They were forced to request immediate repayment of the $50,000 I had contributed to the flowers, claiming my unseemly exit had caused a scene and tarnished the reputation of the Montgomery-Halloway Union. The audacity was breathtaking. They demanded their blood money back. entirely unaware that the woman they were targeting was about to become one of the wealthiest people in their county. I deleted the email without a reply. It was a fly buzzing around a lion, and I had much bigger predators to worry about. I spent those days immersed in research. The London law firm had provided a brief history, but I delved into the archives and microfiches, painstakingly piecing together the true tale of the Halloway name. I learned that my great-uncle, Elias Halloway, had been the black sheep of a powerful textile dynasty that dated back to the late 19th century. They weren't just wealthy, they were industrialists who had built a massive fortune on East Coast shipping and European factories. The family had split over a corporate takeover in the 1950s, a bitter, vicious feud that left my side, the poorer, more sentimental side, on the losing end. We were publicly stripped of our wealth, exiled, and forced to simplify our aristocratic, hyphenated name, leaving us with the plain, common Halloway that Clara had publicly despised. Elias, the great-uncle, was the only one who didn't lose his edge. He moved to Switzerland, bought up rival textile companies, and shrewdly invested in high-end European real estate and commodities, essentially creating his own second dynasty, far from the toxic family drama. He harbored a secret, cold resentment for the half of the family that had cheated my grandmother's line. And with no wife, no children, and only a sense of twisted, delayed justice, he had dictated that the entire vast estate should return to the original bloodline, specifically to the sole remaining relative who carried the unsullied Halloway name. Me. The universe had just delivered the ultimate, cruel twist of fate. The symbol of my life's sacrifice, keeping my last name, was the source of my reward. And my daughter's ultimate act of cruelty, shaming that name, was about to cost her everything. The thought settled into my soul with an almost religious certainty. Justice would not just be served, it would be monumental and public. On Thursday morning, for days after the wedding, I didn't take the old Honda. I called a discreet high-end car service and flew first class to New York City. The luxury was surreal. The leather seats and champagne glasses feeling like props in a bizarre dream. I felt like I was wearing a costume, but a fitting one. The law firm Finch, Cross & Associates was a towering cathedral of glass and steel in Midtown Manhattan. The office was silent, intimidating, and smelled of priceless antiquity. I met with Mr. Thomas Finch, a man so immaculate in his bespoke suit that he looked like he'd been pressed from a mold of old money. "Mrs. Halloway, thank you for coming," Mr. Finch said, his voice a low, precise instrument. "I can confirm that the final formalities were completed this morning. The wire transfer of the first, liquid installment will be initiated today. The estate is quite straightforward. The cash assets alone are confirmed at $10,245,000. The additional value is tied up in international property and art, which we can liquidate as you see fit." I didn't blink. I didn't gasp. I didn't cry. I just nodded, a terrifying absolute calm possessing me. My focus wasn't on the money itself. It was on the plan I had meticulously crafted during my sleepless nights. "Mr. Finch," I said, my voice steady, surprising even myself with its authority. "I need you to handle 3 things for me immediately, and all of them must be done this week." He steepled his fingers. "Ready?" "Certainly, Mrs. Halloway. First, I need a new property. Something grand, something that makes a definitive statement in my hometown. I want the largest house currently for sale in the Montgomery's town. The one that's been on the market for over a year. The massive old Georgian estate, Oakbrook Manor. I want it purchased in cash, immediately, and transferred into a newly created legal entity, the Eleanor Halloway Legacy Foundation. I want the final deed signed by the end of the day tomorrow." Mr. Finch's silver eyebrow arched slightly. "Oakbrook is notorious, Mrs. Halloway. It is very visible, and its maintenance costs are exorbitant. Are you certain you want to make such a public move right now?" "Completely. I want the Montgomerys to see exactly what the name Halloway can now buy." "Very well. And the second thing?" "The second thing involves my current home. I want the finest, most conspicuously expensive luxury vehicle available. A Bentley, a Rolls-Royce, something utterly undeniable, purchased outright and parked permanently at the old property. Then, I want the house listed for immediate sale by the most high-profile luxury realtor in town. The listing must go live the day after I acquire Oakbrook. Mr. Finch leaned back, a flicker of professional curiosity in his eyes. He was seeing not a lottery winner but a strategic opponent. A bold set of actions, Mrs. Halloway. And the third item. I leaned forward, placing my hands flat on the mahogany desk. This was the key to the entire revenge narrative, the core legal weapon. I want you to draft a new will and irrevocable trust. Everything, the $10 million, the houses, the investments, every penny I now or will ever own, will be permanently placed into the Eleanor Halloway Legacy Foundation. The foundation's charter is simple: to provide scholarships for women pursuing professional careers without family financial backing, and to support community arts programs. I want my daughter, Clara Montgomery, listed specifically and permanently as having no claim whatsoever to the foundation, and to be explicitly excluded from any inheritance or benefit upon my death, now or in the future. Mr. Finch's expression hardened into one of cold professional admiration. He was used to writing wills for spite, but rarely on this scale. That is a clear and definitive legal statement, Mrs. Halloway. Are you certain this irrevocable exclusion is what you wish? It is a necessity, Mr. Finch. I am not simply getting rich. I am building a legacy that my daughter cannot touch. A legacy she rejected when she condemned the Halloway name. She chose wealth over family. Now she will have neither. The wire transfer hit my account that afternoon. I opened the banking app on my phone and stared at the figure. $10,245,000. It was no longer abstract. It was the power to execute my justice. That evening I drove in my newly acquired Bentley Flying Spur, sleek, black, and aggressively beautiful, to my old quiet neighborhood. The Bentley looked like an alien spaceship parked on the modest suburban street. I didn't enter the house. I drove the Bentley straight past it and up the winding, exclusive drive that led to Oakbrook Manor. The for sale sign was already gone, replaced by a temporary sign reading Private Property, Eleanor Halloway Legacy Foundation. The sale had been finalized by Mr. Finch's team in under 3 hours. I stood outside the grand iron gates, looking up at the sprawling Georgian mansion with its imposing columns and endless windows. This house, the symbol of entrenched old-school wealth in town, now belonged to the poor, shameful Eleanor Halloway. It was a massive public contradiction I was eager for the Montgomerys to see. My next call was to the highest-end moving company in the city. I need you to quietly pack up a single-family house tomorrow. I need the contents professionally inventoried and delivered to the service wing of Oakbrook Manor. I will not be present. I took the keys to the Bentley, locked it, and left it parked conspicuously on the street near my old home. I called an Uber, instructing the driver to take me to the city's most exclusive hotel. I spent that night in the presidential suite, signing final papers and creating the first small endowment for the foundation. I was no longer Eleanor Halloway, the single mother of 3 jobs. I was Eleanor Halloway, the architect of her own destiny. And the first act of that destiny was ensuring the girl who publicly hated me was about to face the ultimate, crushing consequence of her selfish cruelty. The gossip, as I knew it would, traveled faster than light. In circles defined by money and status, money is the only language and inconsistency is a threat. Clara and Ethan were still isolated on their week-long honeymoon cruise to the Caribbean, a trip I had, with painful irony, helped fund. They were physically cut off from the whirlwind of rumor, which was exactly what I had planned. My actions were designed to brew a perfect storm of confusion and mounting panic. Ensuring their return was a jarring, humiliating shock. The day after my meeting with Mr. Finch, the news hit the Montgomerys' insular social circle like a financial explosion. Oakbrook Manor had sold. Cash offer. No contingency. The new owner was not another Montgomery, nor was it the expected tech magnate. The new owner was a newly formed trust, the Eleanor Halloway Legacy Foundation. The confusion was immediate, the curiosity toxic. People knew the name Eleanor Halloway, but only in the context of Clara Montgomery's poor, quiet, shame-ridden mother. How could that woman suddenly own the most expensive, most prestigious and longest-listed mansion in their county. It was a contradiction that broke their rigid social rules. The second wave of shock hit 48 hours later, the day I put my small old house on the market, listed by the city's most ruthless high-end luxury real estate agent. A move I made specifically for the shock value. The listing went live with a single devastating photograph. The sleek, midnight black Bentley Flying Spur parked directly in the worn-out asphalt driveway. The juxtaposition was scandalous. It was the physical manifestation of a class contradiction that no one could rationally explain. Who was this woman? And where did she get that kind of money, that kind of power? The rumors started to bleed into Clara's Caribbean idyll via frantic texts and emails from her friends. She called me, her voice a blend of sun-drenched entitlement and mounting panic. She was still on the cruise ship, but the serenity was gone. "Mom, what the hell is going on? My friends are sending me links. There's a for sale sign on the lawn and is that a Bentley parked there? Whose is it? Did you take out a loan? Are you having a midlife crisis?" I was sitting in the vast echoing silence of Oakbrook Manor's newly polished library, sipping a rare imported tea that cost more than my old monthly grocery bill. I gave her the quietest, most restrained answer possible, denying her the dramatic conflict she craved. "Hello, Clara. The Bentley is mine. As is the house technically until the sale closes. I'm moving, yes. I have sold the property." "Moving? Where are you going? A dingy apartment. You can't sell that house. It's the only decent asset we have. What about the $50,000 I lent you for the wedding flowers? Are you running off with some ridiculous old man?" she shrieked, her voice cracking with the strain of suppressed hysteria. "You didn't lend it to me, Clara. You forced me to pay it. And I've already moved," I replied calmly. I spoke with the detached precision of a surgeon. "I'm afraid I'm rather busy today. We can discuss this later." I hung up before she could find another insulting question. Her shock was palpable, but crucially, she still hadn't grasped the true scale of the power shift. She likely assumed I'd won some minor lottery prize, maybe a couple $100,000, and was simply doing something reckless and stupid with my meager savings, something she needed to rescue from me so she could claim it. She still believed she was the superior force, the rational one. Ethan's mother, Penelope Montgomery, however, was a sharper, more dangerous woman. She understood the language of real estate and trusts. The purchase of a $5 million property like Oakbrook Manor was not a simple stroke of lottery luck. It was a serious, large-scale financial transaction that spoke of entrenched capital. Penelope knew that my actions were a direct threat to the Montgomerys' reputation for social predictability and control. She called me the next day, her voice oozing a practiced, fake concern that was more toxic than Clara's fury. "Eleanor, darling," she cooed, struggling to maintain the patronizing tone of a rich woman talking down to a poor relation. "What is this madness about Oakbrook Manor? We've all been talking. It's an outrageously expensive property. And this foundation, you can't possibly be funding something like that. Tell me the truth. You must have won the lottery. How much? We can help you manage it. We can protect you from yourself." She was still trying to use the familiar script, the poor, flighty woman who needed a sensible, rich person to handle her money. "Penelope, it's really none of your financial concern," I replied, my voice smooth and utterly devoid of fear. I was enjoying this. The power was sweet. "It is my concern. You are now part of my family's social circle. We need to maintain a certain image. And frankly, your daughter is beside herself. She is frantic. She thinks you've lost your mind and are blowing her potential inheritance." I leaned back in my massive leatherback chair, the sheer scale of the room making my old life seem microscopic. "Inheritance, Penelope?" I chuckled, a low, genuine sound that shocked us both. Clara's inheritance was the excellent education, the international trips, and the life of ease I sacrificed my youth to give her. She already received it. And as for my new assets, they are fully funded and secure. And I can assure you that Clara Montgomery will never receive a single penny of them. I hung up the phone with quiet finality. The bait was successfully set. The daughter was panicking over the loss of her future money. The mother-in-law was panicking over the unpredictable chaos of a suddenly wealthy, uncooperative Holloway. They could not leave this alone. My continued existence, my new status, was an insult to their carefully constructed social hierarchy. They had to seek me out on my territory to demand answers and control. I knew exactly where they would try to corner me. Not at Oakbrook, which was my fortress, but at the one place they felt their social status still held undisputed weight, the exclusive country club where they held their power luncheons. I made a quick phone call to Mr. Finch. Mr. Finch, I require an immediate, full membership at the Montgomery Glen Club. And I need that membership to be processed by tomorrow morning. I imagined Penelope's face when the club manager confirmed that the poor, shameful Eleanor Holloway was now an official member, a rival they couldn't dismiss. The stage was set. The daughter, the son-in-law, and the tyrannical mother-in-law were marching straight toward the devastating truth. They were coming to me to demand money and respect. Instead, I would give them a painful, unforgettable lesson in consequences. The final act of the shaming of the Holloway name was about to be turned into the greatest financial betrayal of their lives. The confrontation occurred exactly 1 week after I had taken ownership of Oakbrook Manor, on a perfect cloudless Saturday afternoon. It was a day of calculated beauty, the kind of day designed to mask the ugliness of human greed. I was sitting on the sun-drenched terrace of the Montgomery Glen Club, the exclusive, prestigious establishment where Penelope and Ethan did all their business networking and social maneuvering. I was now a member, a fact that had surely sent Penelope into fits of cold, aristocratic rage. I wore a deceptively simple, perfectly tailored silk suit, sipping an iced tea, and pretending to review the club's financial prospectus, which now, thanks to my lawyer, contained my own investment portfolio. I heard them before I saw them. The familiar, clipped, furious tones of Penelope and the high-pitched, desperate whine of Clara. They marched onto the terrace, their faces tight with a venomous mixture of rage, confusion, and overwhelming panic. They were flanked by a silent, tense Ethan, his usual swagger replaced by a nervous, calculating pallor. "There you are!" Clara practically shrieked, her voice cutting through the lazy hum of conversation and drawing the immediate, intense attention of every wealthy patron within earshot. She was exactly where I wanted her. Loud, desperate, and public. "Mom, we've been calling you for days. What is this joke?" she demanded, slamming her designer handbag onto my table. "You sold the house? You bought Oakbrook Manor? Did you win a measly couple of $100,000 and go completely insane? You need to stop this madness and give us a loan, or at least invest it in Ethan's new venture. You're just wasting it on a giant, pointless house." Clara's face, usually so flawlessly composed, was a mess of strained entitlement. She was operating under the assumption that I had acquired a small windfall, enough to be annoying, but certainly not enough to be truly powerful. Ethan, the new son-in-law, finally spoke up, his voice oily and conciliatory, trying to wrest control of the scene. "Eleanor, let's be rational. Please sit down. You don't have the experience for this kind of money. We, the Montgomerys, can ensure it's handled properly. We'll set up a family trust. You'll be taken care of." "Taken care of?" I repeated, the phrase tasting like ash. The implication was clear. They intended to seize my money and put me out to pasture. Penelope, ever the puppeteer, took charge. "Eleanor, we need the number. This charade ends now. You have embarrassed us. The name Holloway is being dragged through society papers because you've become a sudden, eccentric nuisance. Tell us the amount you won and we'll handle the PR and the investments. You clearly need guidance." I put my prospectus down slowly. The silence that followed was deliberate, heavy, and mine alone. My eyes locked directly on Clara. I remembered her face at the altar, the satisfaction in her cruel smile as she watched me break. I knew I would never regret what I was about to do. "Clara, Ethan, Penelope," I said, my voice low and steady, radiating a dangerous calm. "Sit down. We need to talk about the Holloway name." Clara groaned, rolling her eyes with theatrical exasperation. "Oh please, not that ridiculous name again. It's embarrassing. It is embarrassing, isn't it? I agreed, tilting my head slightly. Especially when you told 300 people at your wedding that you hated the Holloway name and were ashamed to be my daughter. Clara flushed, quickly trying to minimize the attack. Mom, it was a joke. A bit for the wedding. You're making a spectacle of yourself over a harmless comment. It was not a joke, Clara. It was a vicious betrayal. I corrected her, my tone devoid of emotion. And since you hate the name so much, you clearly never bothered to look into its true history. That was your ultimate mistake. I leaned forward, dropping the first piece of the truth like a perfectly polished stone. The Holloway name, the one I kept, the one you shamed, belongs to a family line that was once a European textile powerhouse. My great-uncle Elias Holloway, who passed away 3 weeks ago, was the last surviving, independent heir of that dynasty. And because I was the only person left with the pure legal Holloway name, he left everything to me. Clara frowned, utterly bewildered and defensive. What is this fairy tale? Your long-lost uncle? What everything? A small savings account. I smiled, a genuine cold smile that held no warmth whatsoever. This was the moment of complete power. I'm talking about $10 million, Clara. More accurately, $10,245,000. I inherited it the week of your wedding. I signed the final transfer papers the week you returned from your cruise. The resulting silence was absolute, a psychological vacuum. The wealthy patrons nearby, who had been eavesdropping with thinly veiled interest, froze. Penelope's jaw dropped so dramatically she looked momentarily foolish. Ethan's white face seemed to shrink further. Clara, however, seemed to physically break. Her eyes widened, focusing on a point behind me, struggling to process the number. $10 million, she whispered, the color draining from her face, leaving her expensive makeup stark and grotesque. You had $10 million that week? And you let me stand up there and say that? You let me call you ashamed? You let them laugh at me. You felt that shame, Clara. I just provided the microphone. I retorted, the vindication pouring through me like icy potent champagne. You made your choice. You condemned the name that was about to save you. I stood up slowly, ensuring I towered over the Montgomerys. My voice, now resonating with authority and finality, carried across the terrace. You hated the name. You shamed your family for its perceived lack of wealth. You chose the Montgomery name over the one that was about to make you an heiress. So be it. You have made your choice, and I will honor it. I reached into my bag and slowly, dramatically, pulled out the document I had ready. It was not the will itself, but the public-facing charter. This is the charter for the Eleanor Holloway Legacy Foundation, I announced, watching Clara's terrified eyes follow the crisp, expensive paper. All $10 million, plus the value of Oakbrook Manor, have been placed into this irrevocable trust. It provides scholarships for women pursuing careers. It is dedicated to building the Holloway name into one of true positive legacy. I looked directly into her face, which was now contorted with a desperate, frantic realization. Her tears were finally starting to fall, but they were the tears of a spoiled child who just dropped her favorite toy. And you, Clara Montgomery, are listed here explicitly and permanently as having no claim whatsoever to the foundation. You have no claim on the name, and you will have no claim on the fortune it brought me. You are officially disinherited. Clara let out a choked sound, a mixture of a sob and a strangled scream of pure, desperate rage and terror. She took a stumbling step toward me, her hands twitching as if to grab the paper, or perhaps to physically attack me. You evil bitch. That's my money. I'm your daughter. I deserve that money. You can't do this to me. I'll sue you. I'll tell the papers you're insane. Ethan, seeing his entire future evaporate, scrambled to his feet, grabbing Clara's arm. Eleanor, please. We can fix this. She'll apologize publicly. We can be partners. The Holloway name can fund the Montgomery empire. We can be untouchable. I looked at Ethan with utter withering contempt. You stood by when she publicly humiliated me. You showed me exactly what you value. And you are too late. The money is secured. The trust is irrevocable. There is nothing you can do. I turned my attention to Penelope, who was sitting utterly defeated, all her false dignity gone. She was trembling. "Penelope," I stated, my voice cutting through the rising hysteria. "Tell your son and your daughter that the shameful Holloway woman has just ensured that the Montgomerys, for all their wealth, will never be able to touch the one thing they value most, free money. Your family name is still rich, but mine is now untouchable. And yours is utterly exposed." With that, I threw a single crisp $100 bill onto the table to cover the tea. I turned my back, ignoring Clara's hysterical screams of "Mommy, please!" and Ethan's desperate pleas for partnership. I walked away from the shattered Montgomerys, leaving Clara's raw, desperate sobs and the shocked, delicious silence of the entire Montgomery Glen Club behind me. I was Eleanor Holloway, and the power of $10 million was finally mine. The great confrontation at the Montgomery Glen Club was not just a public scene. It was the start of the final, devastating act of my vengeance. It was the moment their gilded world started to crumble. The immediate aftermath was a flurry of enraged activity from the Montgomery camp. They didn't accept defeat easily. Their first desperate move was legal. They hired their own high-powered litigation firm, the kind that specialized in challenging wills and trusts, to overturn the Eleanor Holloway Legacy Foundation. Their lawyers argued that I was clearly mentally unstable due to the trauma of the wedding, and that the trust was formed under duress and vindictive malice. But Mr. Finch had done his job perfectly. The trust was not just airtight, it was a fortress. The exclusion of Clara was legally sound because the inheritance was explicitly tied to the Holloway name, which Clara had publicly and legally abandoned. Furthermore, the exclusion was built on the precedent of a prior family feud, the same feud that had given me the name in the first place, lending it historical and legal weight. The Montgomerys were utterly defeated in court. They spent hundreds of thousands of dollars only to be told that the $10 million was irrevocably placed in a philanthropic foundation, safe from any claim by Clara Montgomery. The court ruling essentially validated my actions, affirming that Clara's public condemnation of the name had been the precise, catastrophic choice that disqualified her. Clara tried every tactic imaginable to reclaim what she saw as her money. First came the tearful, pathetic apologies, flooding my phone and email. She showed up at the front gate of Oakbrook Manor, which was now monitored by a private security firm, tear-stained and desperate, begging for forgiveness. "Mom, please. I'm sorry. I was drunk. I was nervous. It was just a joke. I didn't mean it. Please, I'm your only daughter. Holloway is a beautiful name. Just give me enough for a down payment. $1 million, please. I'll change my last name back to Holloway Montgomery." I met her only once in the grand, echoing foyer of the manor, standing under the colossal crystal chandelier I had recently installed. I was polite, tailored, and utterly remote. "Your apology is not for me, Clara. It is for the $10 million you lost," I stated, my voice echoing slightly in the vast space. "I know the difference. You value money above all else, and you made a public transaction. You traded our family name for status. I simply validated the price you set." "I need it, Mom," she wailed, collapsing onto a velvet settee. "Ethan's business is failing. His family is cutting us off because you made a spectacle of them. We have nowhere to go. We're losing everything. And yet, I never publicly shamed you on your wedding day," I pointed out, my voice flat. "You created your spectacle, and I simply accepted the consequences. Now leave. I have a foundation meeting in an hour. You are trespassing." The finality of the rejection was a physical blow to her. She left screaming threats of ruin, but I knew she was hollow. She had no leverage left. The Montgomerys suffered a rapid, public decline. Ethan's real estate business was not only failing, but was also heavily exposed to their private debts. The public humiliation of the $10 million inheritance they couldn't touch destroyed their social capital, the one thing holding their shaky empire together. Creditors, sensing weakness, began to circle. Within 8 months, they were forced to sell off assets at a catastrophic loss, including Penelope's beloved lakeside estate. Clara and Ethan moved out of their expensive apartment and into a small, rented townhouse outside the city's affluent circle. The last time I saw Clara, she was working as a retail clerk at a mediocre department store, looking exhausted and carrying none of the old entitlement that had defined her. She saw me across the crowded floor. I was there to buy a dress for a foundation gala, and she quickly spun away, hiding behind a rack of cheap clothes. But in that brief moment, I saw the depth of the bitterness, the raw regret, and the complete, utter devastation in her eyes. It was a perfect, silent, and satisfying vengeance. I didn't waste the $10 million on a superficial life. I honored the Foundation's charter with the exact precision I used to plan my revenge. The Eleanor Holloway Legacy Foundation quickly became a major force for good in the city. I funded an entire wing of the local community college, aptly naming it the Holloway School of Business and Finance, dedicated to providing full scholarships for ambitious young women who lacked financial backing, the very opportunity one had to sacrifice 30 years ago. I set up an arts endowment in my mother's name, finally building a legacy for a family that had only ever known shame. I sold Oakbrook Manor a year later. It was too vast, too grand, and too much of a monument to a petty victory. I used the proceeds to purchase a beautiful, spacious apartment in the city center, where I could be close to the work of the foundation. I hired a small, trusted staff and spent my days reviewing scholarship applications, feeling the profound satisfaction of putting my fortune toward a necessary life-affirming cause, a cause my daughter, with her focus purely on superficiality and greed, would never have understood. The irony was the final, sweetest reward. Clara, obsessed with inherited status, lost the only chance she ever had to achieve it, all because she publicly denounced the name that carried the fortune. I, the mother she had called ashamed, was now the respected philanthropic power broker in the city, the name Eleanor Holloway synonymous with generosity and quiet strength. One chilly evening, I was preparing to give the keynote speech at a major charity gala. I was dressed in a simple, bespoke black gown, wearing minimal jewelry. As I was getting ready, I looked at myself in the mirror. I saw a woman who was financially untouchable, emotionally healed, and absolutely unapologetically powerful. I realized then that my revenge wasn't the loss of the money for Clara. That was merely the mechanism. My true revenge was the total, complete reclamation of my self-worth. Clara had tried to bury the Holloway name in shame. I had revived it, polished it, and built a legacy with it that would stand for generations. I did lose a daughter that day, the daughter I had raised and sacrificed for, but I gained my freedom, my fortune, and my self-respect. And standing there, looking at the elegant, content woman staring back at me, I knew that the decision to keep the $10 million from the girl who hated me was the best, most just decision I had ever made.